It all began back in 1996. Bethel was sitting in his car writing out a check he intended to drop off at a nearby internet provider's office. He was startled by the sound of knocking on his window and looked up to see two kids. He couldn't figure out why, but a jolt of fear ran through him. They were just kids, but something was wrong with them. He just couldn't figure out what. He cracked his window just enough to talk to them. The oldest of the two boys asked for a ride to their mother's house. He claimed they were going to see a movie, forgot their money, and needed a ride so that they could make it back to the movie in time. The movie theater was close enough that Bethel could read the marquee, so he asked the boys what they were going to see. Mortal Kombat was the reply. Brian knew that movie had already started an hour ago. Also, there was just something wrong with the pair. The way they spoke wasn't natural. They didn't sound as young as they looked. "Just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll go to our mother's house." Everything the older boys said sent shivers down Bethel's spine. But then he saw it. The pitch black eyes, lacking any real substance or soul. Bethel didn't even try to hide his horror. "Come on, mister, we won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun." The more he spoke, the more Bethel was sure he had to get out of there. He threw his car in reverse, the boys still yelling to be let in, and sped off. He gave one quick glance behind him, but saw nothing. The black-eyed boys simply vanished before he even made it out of the parking lot. The incident took place about 13 years ago. I had just moved to a new city with my wife. We were small-town newlyweds from the Midwest. We moved cross-country to one of the biggest cities in the Southwest so I could attend graduate school. Being naive and new to city living, I habitually answered the door without a second thought. Never again after this. The first thing that should have tipped me off to the peculiarity of this situation was the fact that someone was knocking at 6 in the morning. The second thing that should have dawned on me is that this kid had to reach over a rather tall patio gate to unlatch and open it. The knock at the door was startling. My wife and I were getting ready for work, a pretty normal routine. The moment I opened the door, I was overtaken with an inexplicable sense of fear. To this day, I can picture him. Teenager, average height, average build, knee-length black leather coat, short black hair, and sunglasses. The sunglasses at 6 a.m. struck me as odd, and even more odd, he was eating an apple. He was very polite and asked if he could come in and warm up. I said no, closed the door, and slid the security chain into place. A moment later, another knock. I opened the now chained door, and before I could speak again, he asked me again if he could come in and warm up. "No," I replied, and attempted to close the door. Before the door could shut, he put his hand out, stopping the door on its hinges. He looked directly into my eyes, still wearing his sunglasses, and said, "Can I at least get some ketchup for my apple?" "Fuck that," I replied, albeit a little confused. "Get the hell out of here. My wife is calling the police." He takes a moment to let this information sink in, lowers his glasses, revealing eyes as black as obsidian, and says, "No, you won't be calling anyone." At that moment, I force the door closed, lock it, and call out to my wife. She is scared shitless, hiding in the bedroom. All jacked up on adrenaline, I rip the curtains back to look out the window, next to the door. He's gone. Absolutely no trace of him. I go out on the patio and check the gate. It's still latched from the inside. That was fucked up, and I think to myself as I turn to enter the house. I notice a half-eaten apple lying on the ground. It was around 5 a.m. on July 31st, 2010. Noetic was taking a smoke break outside when he noticed two teenage boys standing motionlessly and staring at him from across the street. Though he felt somewhat unnerved, he finished his smoke and went back inside. 10 minutes after heading inside, the intercom buzzed. Noetic checked the monitor, and there they were. Two boys had made their way over to his building and were now staring into the surveillance camera like they could see through him. Through the speaker, he asked what they wanted. They said nothing, but motioned for him to come outside. He hit the speaker button again and told them to go away. They didn't leave, but continued to stare into the camera as if they were watching Noetic as he worked. After a short while, Noetic went to the door to chase them off. Right before opening the door, he saw them through the one-way glass and was horrified to see their eyes were completely black. He knew he had to open up the door and tell them to go away, and he decided he'd call the police if he had to. As if the boys read his mind, the moment the door opened, he said, "That will not be necessary, sir. We simply need to use your phone. Can you let us in?" Noetic was not about to fall for that nonsense. He pulled out his cell phone and threatened to call the police if they didn't leave. He made sure the door was locked and went back to the monitor. Only one boy was still there staring at the camera. Then he realized the second boy positioned himself out back and was staring into the camera there. By 6 a.m., both boys had moved into a blind spot with no camera coverage. Noetic waited for them to reappear, but they simply vanished. The police arrived not long after, but both boys were gone. On March 17, 2008, I had my one and only encounter with a black-eyed kid. Before my experience, I had never heard of anything having to do with the black-eyed kids. I was 12. I was sitting outside of a hairdresser in an old Chevy pickup, waiting for my mom to get her hair cut. About 15 minutes had passed, and I saw some kid walking back and forth along the sidewalk in front of my parked car. At first, I thought I recognized him as one of my friends from school, so I banged on the front windshield until he looked my way. It was not anyone I knew. At this point, I was not scared at all. Not yet. The boy walked over to the side of my car and just stares. I think to let me get a good look at his eyes to freak me out. Let me tell you, if you have never seen a black-eyed kid, you have no idea what to imagine. Pupils black as the night sky. The boy whispers, "You must let me in." And then I locked the car doors and ducked down into a space between the two seats. 5 minutes later, he was gone. When my mother got into the car, she told me a boy with black eyes had come into the hairdresser, had insisted for my mother to give him the keys to the car. She refused. Thank God she did. In January 2016, a Vermont woman reported that she actually let black-eyed children into her home. A little over a year prior, a blizzard was ravaging the world outside her door, so she was very surprised to hear a loud knock on it. Figuring someone probably crashed their car trying to navigate the weather, she made her way to the door and peeked out the window. There was no car. She described a feeling of dread wash over her for reasons she couldn't understand. The banging continued, so she decided to wake her husband to let him answer instead. 2 small children were on the other side of the door, and they were not dressed appropriately for the storm. The woman and her husband let the little boy and girl inside despite the great sense of unease their presence made them feel, and regretted it almost instantly. One cat hissed while the other 3 hid. Unusual behavior for all of them. And it didn't seem to matter what the woman asked them. "What happened? Are you lost? Want some cocoa?" The answer was always the same. "Our parents will be here soon." She made them cocoa anyway, and when she returned with the mugs, that's when she noticed their eyes. They were completely jet black, with no whites at all, just giant black pupils. They asked for the bathroom and she directed them to it. Then everything happened all at once. Her husband's nose started bleeding. The power went out, and as she rushed to get a tissue, she was confronted by both children staring at her from the hall. "Our parents are here." They then walked out the front door. She watched as the creepy children got into a black car with 2 very tall men in suits. They left. Within months of the encounter, 3 of their 4 cats went missing. The 4th, the one that hissed, was found in a pool of blood, dead from hemorrhaging. Her husband's nosebleeds continued, and he was eventually diagnosed with skin cancer, despite spending little time outdoors. The woman began suffering from chronic nosebleeds as her husband initially had, and her health began slowly deteriorating. She is certain it's because of the black-eyed children.